Let me first acknowledge one thing right up front, and that is the skill map assessment administrative system is a complex system, and we've known that for a long time. We've made efforts to simplify it, but whenever we have made efforts to simplify it, we've always first focused on the end user experience, the respondent experience, and wanting to make sure that that's the most positive experience possible. And of course what that means, because there is a natural tension between the respondent experience and having robust reporting capability. The easiest respondent experience would be, hey, press a button, answer some questions, here's your result. That'd be fantastic. But if it was that simple and we hadn't captured the right information, we wouldn't have robust reporting capability. And also there's a tension between ease of execution and flexibility in implementation. So I would have to say and acknowledge that the strength of our system is flexible implementation. It can do a ton of different things. It gives you huge areas of control. The downside is there is some inherent complexity. So with that in mind, let me just say first, what we do internally when we're using the system, when we decide how we're going to add a particular group of respondents, because we use all three methods of inserting new respondents. For our prospects, we want to make sure that it's as easy as possible for them to register and provide immediate feedback. We want them to be able to, the moment they receive an email or the moment they go to a website, we want them to, the moment we've captured their attention, we simply want the prospect to be able to click on a button and quickly self-register and take an assessment. And we're not really that interested in robust aggregate reporting, because all we really need to know is the prospect either did or didn't complete an assessment, and we want to be notified of that. For clients, on the other hand, typically our clients are interested in the reporting capabilities, the aggregate group reports, and we work with the client to know in advance, how are you going to want to use the information? Are you just going to use the individual results? Are you going to want to run aggregate group results for your whole group? Are you going to want to break it down by division, by territory, by department? And we make sure that we know in advance exactly how it's going to be used. Then we can make sure that the uploading of data or the inserting of the respondent data is effective for what those results are going to be. The other thing we have to be clear about is how much access do we have to respondent information. There are situations where we don't have the names or email addresses of respondents, even client organizations. We've had situations where a client says, I've got 80 salespeople and I need them all to complete this. No, I don't have email addresses for all of them. And no, I can't necessarily give you a list of names for all of them. We've got 20% of them are new hires and our HR systems haven't caught up yet. And some of them aren't with us anymore. So if you've got a client who has not great internal data, you can still utilize the system, but you're limited in terms of how to get people into the system. And then finally, how are those results going to be used? With that in mind, let's just start with the simple, straightforward approach to inserting a respondent. So when we're manually inserting respondents, this is the easiest part, particularly because with manual insertion, these are the required fields. So you can manually insert a respondent. I'm sorry, there's a small error here because the email is also required. So it's username, password, first and last name, and email address. You have the ability to create usernames based on whatever protocols you want to create. We have opted for making the username the same as the email address. There are a few occasions where that's an exception, where we've got perhaps a company that wants the login for the skill map system to exactly match their other HR system logins. If they want that exact match and their usernames are not their email addresses, that's fine. Then we'll go with their credentials or their protocol. But most typically, easily 95% of the time, username is email address, and then but then you have to enter it in both places. So the username and the email address are entered the same, first and last name, And then again, password and the password verification, you can determine what your protocol is. The password does have to be a minimum of 4 characters, but again, we left it open in terms of what you can enter, because we have some clients who want the password to exactly match their internal systems. Most of the time, though, they just leave it to us to determine an actual password. So I'm going to walk you through a quick example of manual entry. This is the actual skill map system. So this is a live demo here, and I created a demonstration account. So I'm just going to go ahead and log into this account, and if I'm going to enter a new respondent, and if I'm going to do it manually, this is my main screen. This is what most of you who have admin portals already set up, you already have a screen like this where it currently says New Affiliate LLC. Those of you who have your own portals already set up, you know that your business name is there. So if I want to insert a new respondent, I click on Manage Respondents. That brings me to the screen, and you can see as part of this demo, I've already inserted a few new respondents. I click on Insert Respondent, and then the main screen comes up. As we said before, I insert the required fields, but a couple of points that I want to make here. In addition to inserting the required fields, there are a couple of important points to make on this screen. When you are entering a new respondent, if you click Admin Email Notify, what that means is that you, as the administrator, assuming you've set up your email system as we send you instructions, you will receive a copy of every system email that's automatically generated for that respondent. So if that respondent forgot his password, and he goes to the main screen and he enters his email address and he clicks the send password button, you'll get a copy of that automated message that goes to him. You'll get it at your system administrator email address. If he completes an assessment and the system automatically sends a notification to him saying you've completed the following assessment, you'll get copied on that assessment as well. So what I would typically recommend is that at the beginning you always click that button, even when you're just doing kind of one-offs, because you want to stay informed in terms of who's using the system and what they're doing with it, even with small groups. There will come a point in time when you're uploading dozens, hundreds of respondents. We had a situation where I uploaded about 700 salespeople to complete an assessment, and without thinking, I selected the admin email notify for all of them, and my inbox was just plugged with emails for about a day and a half until I came to my senses, and I went back and I changed that notification for that particular group. The other thing to note is if you enter company, you'll notice, in fact, I'll try to just walk you through a really quick example. If I just add a username, let's just say joe@fl.com, the system will allow duplicate first names, duplicate last names. It will not allow duplicate email addresses. So you can have a group of people all have the same password, but it will not allow duplicate email addresses. So let's just put Joe FL. Now, for Joe, this person that I'm entering here, I'm also going to enter his email address. The system won't allow me to create a new user without an email address. But now I'm going to assign a company name to Joe. And the reason I'm highlighting this particular field is that while it's not a required field, when you put a company name in that field, and I'm just going to put company X, when you do that and you insert this new respondent, if you were watching carefully, there was a brief moment where the screen stopped because it was storing that information. The system stores all company names that you've entered, and now if I click on the manager button that indicates that Joe is a manager, it will flag Joe as a manager option for company X if I'm trying to manually select managers for other employees of company X. And I'll quickly run you through the demo. I don't want to take too much time with this, but let's go ahead and we'll insert Joe. Okay, so now I've got Joe FL for company X. I'm going to go ahead and insert another respondent. And this person, we'll call this person Bob at fl.com. And this is going to be Bob. In this case, while you can't necessarily see it, I'm giving them the exact same password because the system allows me to do that. And now, this is the important point of this particular demonstration. I'm going to indicate to the system that Bob is also with company X, but Bob is not a manager. For this particular purpose, if I scroll down and I want to now select Bob's first level manager, you'll see that Joe FL shows up. And that's what was happening when you saw that brief flash on the screen. Now, this is the functionality that we'll talk about even more in just a few moments. But the importance of that functionality is that now, if Joe is flagged as Bob's manager, now when I insert Joe, and I go back to Bob, and notice now under Bob, actually, I'm sorry, I needed to go back to Joe. My mistake. I go back to Joe. Joe is the manager, and the manager button is clicked because we flagged Joe as a manager. So by clicking that button, it puts Joe in the drop-down list for managers. Now, and you'll see this when we do the bulk upload. If you're just bulk uploading a file, that's all automatically updated. Now, if I click Email Notify next to Joe, then not only does the system recognize Joe as a manager, but now every time that someone completes something in the system, someone for whom Joe is flagged as a manager, Joe will receive an automated email. So in this particular case, Joe is a manager, is going to receive automated emails. The administrator is going to receive an automated email. I'm going to click on Update at the bottom. And now if Bob were to go ahead and complete an assessment, not only would his manager receive a copy of the email, the administrator would receive a copy of the email, and then Joe himself would receive a copy of the email. So let's go ahead, or I'm sorry, Bob himself would receive a copy of the email. Now, while this webcast is focused on inserting respondents, just a really quick point now, I've inserted these two new respondents. If I want to go ahead and assign an assessment for a particular respondent, let's say Bob, if I go over to the right-hand side and click under the skill maps column, here is where I assign assessments to Bob. So I'm going to assign 2 assessments to Bob. I'm going to go back to Manage Respondents. I'm going to select Joe. Oh, my bad. I'm going to select Joe, and I'm going to go over to here, and I'm going to assign a couple of assessments to Joe as well. And then I'm going to go back to Manage Respondents. You'll also see in this skill maps column when respondents have completed assessments. For example, this previous test user that we created, this user has actually completed a couple of assessments. So over here, we can actually review the results of those particular assessments. If I click on View Results, then that respondent's results will show up. And also, if I want to go ahead and click and open up the complete report for that respondent, I'm not going to do it right now, but I have access. So I have access to all of the results of respondents in the system. I'm going to go back to my main administration screen. So In terms of manually inserting new respondents, we are not going to go through all of these other fields at this point. Let me just say this about the other fields. They're all optional. They can be used in a variety of ways, and I would say we only use them in perhaps 10, maybe 15% of the actual client engagements, and it's typically with a client who wants robust reporting. They want more than just a single group report. They want to break things down by division, by job code, by length of employment, those sorts of things. So you can think of each of these fields as essentially open fields that can be used in a variety of ways, just based upon how you decide you want to use them. If you click any of these boxes here, then those boxes will be visible to the individual respondent when he's looking at his own profile. So if I were to go ahead and log in as Joe or Bob that we just created, there's a little link that allows them to see their profile in the system. They can see their username, they can see their first name and last name, and they can see any of these other fields if you've made them visible. Again, we don't typically use them, but on occasion they are helpful. Now it gets interesting. So the manual entry is useful, and we do use it on occasion, but now we get to some of the more interesting applications.